Picture a jellyfish floating in the dark ocean, fully grown, mature, nearing the end of its life. Most animals would simply die at this point, but this one does something that shouldn't be possible. Its bell starts to collapse, folding in on itself like a deflating balloon. Its tentacles don't just retract, they melt back into its body. Over the next day and a half, this adult creature will literally digest itself from the inside out and reassemble into a baby. Not a baby version of itself, the actual larval stage it left behind months ago. A completely different body structure, a different form of life, and then it will grow up all over again, as if nothing happened. This is Turritopsis dohrnii, the immortal jellyfish, and it's the only complex animal on Earth that can reverse its own aging process on command. Scientists have watched individual jellyfish do this over 10 times in laboratory conditions, and there's no known limit to how many times it can repeat the cycle. Some jellyfish don't just avoid death, they run away from it backwards. Let's start with what we're actually dealing with, because the immortal jellyfish is almost disappointingly small for something with such a dramatic ability. Turritopsis dohrnii is a transparent blob barely 4.5 millimeters across, about the size of your pinky fingernail. It drifts through tropical and temperate oceans worldwide, eating microscopic plankton and trying desperately not to get eaten. What makes it special is a biological process called transdifferentiation. And here's what it actually means. The jellyfish's cells can change their identity completely. Imagine if your skin cells woke up one day and decided to become brain cells, or your heart muscle suddenly transformed into stomach lining. That's transdifferentiation, and this jellyfish does it constantly when reverting to its juvenile form. Now, before we go further, we need to clear something up. Immortal does not mean invincible. The immortal jellyfish can still be eaten by fish, crushed by currents, killed by disease, or destroyed by pollution. It's actually extremely fragile. What it can't do is die from old age, under the right conditions. If nothing else kills it first, this jellyfish can escape aging indefinitely by literally rewinding its own development. It doesn't slow down aging, it reverses it completely and starts over. To understand why this is so mind-blowing, you need to see how jellyfish normally develop. Every jellyfish starts as a fertilized egg that hatches into a microscopic swimming larva called a planula. The planula drifts until it finds something solid, a rock, coral, anything it can grab onto, then it glues itself down and transforms into a polyp. The polyp looks nothing like a jellyfish. Picture a tiny tube with tentacles on top, like a miniature sea anemone the size of a grain of rice. It's stuck in one spot, filtering plankton and slowly growing. When conditions are right, the polyp starts budding off baby jellyfish from its body. These babies, called ephyrae, look like tiny 8-pointed stars. They swim away and grow into adult medusae, the classic bell-shaped jellyfish with trailing tentacles. For 99.9% of jellyfish species, this journey is one way only. Once you become an adult, you can never go back to being a polyp. That's a completely different form with a completely different body plan. You reproduce and then you die. End of story. Turritopsis dohrnii looked at this system and said, "Actually, no, I'm going to break that rule." Here's what happens when the immortal jellyfish decides to reverse, and I want you to really visualize this. The adult jellyfish, swimming freely, suddenly stops. It sinks to the ocean floor and lands on something solid. Then its bell starts to collapse inward. The tissue actively reorganizes itself, folding and contracting. The tentacles begin retracting, but they're not just pulling back, they're being reabsorbed. The tissue is breaking down and being pulled back into the main body mass. Over 24 to 36 hours, the entire jellyfish essentially melts. Its structure liquefies from the inside, not dying, but reorganizing, like clay being smooshed back into a ball before being resculpted. And here's where it gets truly weird. While this happens, the jellyfish's cells undergo massive transdifferentiation. Muscle cells transform into nerve cells become digestive cells turn into structural cells. Everything gets reshuffled like a deck of cards. What emerges is not an adult anymore. It's a polyp, a tiny tube stuck to the seafloor, the same life stage this jellyfish inhabited months ago. And from that polyp, it can grow back into an adult, go through its entire life again, and reverse again if needed. In theory, if nothing kills it, a single Turritopsis could cycle through this process thousands of times over thousands or millions of years. Let's dig into how this actually works, because this is cellular reprogramming at a scale that shouldn't be possible. When you're an embryo, your cells are pluripotent. They can become any type your body needs. But as you develop, those cells lock into specific identities. A cell commits to being a neuron, and from that point forward, it's a neuron for life. This is true for almost every complex animal. Once your cells specialize, they stay specialized. It's a one-way process, and that prevents chaos in your body. But Turritopsis evolved a way to unlock those doors again. When it triggers reversal, it activates genes normally only active during embryonic development, genes that control cell fate. These genes tell differentiated cells, forget what you are, go back to being flexible. The cells revert to a less specialized state, almost like stem cells, and then get reassigned completely new identities. A muscle cell breaks down its muscle proteins, reactivates developmental genes, and rebuilds itself as a nerve cell with completely different structures, same DNA, completely different job. This happens across the jellyfish's entire body. Thousands of cells all changing identity in coordinated transformation. It's like melting a car back into raw materials and reassembling them into a motorcycle, same atoms, completely different machine. For humans, this would be catastrophically dangerous because the genes controlling cell identity, when dysregulated, cause cancer. Cancer is when a cell forgets its proper role and divides uncontrollably. So giving cells the ability to change identity removes the safety locks preventing cancer, which is why human cells don't naturally do this. But in 2022, scientists sequenced Turritopsis's complete genome and discovered something fascinating. This jellyfish has extra copies of genes related to DNA repair, tumor suppression, and protection against cellular damage. It evolved redundant safety systems that allow cell reprogramming without triggering uncontrolled growth. It's like having a car that can completely disassemble and reassemble itself, but with built-in safeguards preventing it from accidentally building a bomb. The flexibility is dangerous, but the protections make it safe. Now, the critical question: why would evolution create something this weird? What advantage is there to turning back into a baby? The answer becomes clear when you look at where Turritopsis lives. The open ocean is unstable. Food availability fluctuates wildly. Temperatures shift with currents. Predators appear without warning, and injuries are common. For most species, if conditions deteriorate, you cope immediately or you die. But Turritopsis evolved a third option, the emergency eject button. If it's starving as an adult and can't find plankton, it reverts to a polyp, which is far more resilient and can survive without food much longer. If it's badly injured, instead of dying from wounds, it resets its entire body and rebuilds with healthy cells. Polyps are also dramatically safer than free-swimming jellyfish. A jellyfish floating in open water is easy prey for fish and sea turtles. It's visible, slow, and made of delicious protein. But a polyp is a tiny tube stuck to a rock, camouflaged and barely noticeable. From an evolutionary perspective, this is genius. Instead of dying when conditions become lethal, Turritopsis retreats into its durable form and waits out bad times. Then when conditions improve, it grows back into an adult and continues living. But this strategy has massive trade-offs. First, the transformation is incredibly risky. During those 24 to 36 hours of reorganizing, it's completely defenseless. It can't swim, hunt, or respond to threats. It's just a blob hoping nothing eats it. Many die during this process. Second, reversal is energetically expensive. Breaking down and rebuilding your body requires enormous energy, which is ironic because the jellyfish often triggers this specifically. Because it's starving, it's a last-ditch survival move, not casual. Third, there's no guarantee it works. If the jellyfish is too damaged, or if conditions change during transformation, the process fails and it dies halfway through. And finally, there's a philosophical question scientists still debate. Is the jellyfish that emerges actually the same individual that went in? It has the same DNA, but every cell has been reorganized, its structure completely rebuilt. Is it the same jellyfish, or functionally a clone sharing the same genetic code? The immortal jellyfish might achieve eternal life, but it's unclear whether the self persists through each transformation. Now, the discovery story, because it's almost as bizarre as the jellyfish itself. In 1988, a German marine biology student named Christian Sommer was studying in Rapallo, Italy, collecting jellyfish for a class project. He kept some Turritopsis specimens in petri dishes, observing their behavior, standard student work. Except then, something impossible started happening. Some adult jellyfish, which should have died after reproducing, didn't die. They sank to the dish bottom, contracted, changed shape, and over following days, transformed into polyps. Sommer assumed he'd made a mistake. Maybe these weren't fully mature, but when he kept watching, those polyps grew back into adults, swam around, and then some transformed back into polyps again. A complete cycle repeating indefinitely. He realized he was watching something that violated fundamental rules of animal development. This was a butterfly turning back into a caterpillar. It shouldn't be possible. He published his findings in 1996, expecting scientists to lose their minds. Instead, almost nothing happened. The paper was in a relatively obscure journal, and the few researchers who saw it were skeptical. The results seemed too extraordinary. And Sommer was just a student. His discovery was essentially ignored. It took nearly a decade before labs in Japan and Spain began replicating his observations in the mid-2000s, confirming, yes, this jellyfish really can reverse development repeatedly. Slowly, the scientific community accepted the immortal jellyfish was real. Part of why it took so long is that Turritopsis is nightmarishly difficult to study. These jellyfish are tiny, fragile, and require extremely precise conditions. Water temperature, salinity, and food must be perfect. Even slight variations kill them. The reversal process is also maddeningly unpredictable. You can't just make a jellyfish transform. You have to stress it by starving or injuring it. And even then, sometimes it reverses, and sometimes it just dies. Despite these obstacles, interest in Turritopsis has exploded recently because potential implications for human medicine are staggering. Think about what this jellyfish accomplished. It solved cellular aging, the gradual accumulation of damage that eventually kills every complex organism. If scientists could safely replicate even a fraction of what Turritopsis does, we could potentially reverse age-related tissue damage, regenerate deteriorated organs, or treat degenerative diseases. We've already made progress in cellular reprogramming. Scientists developed induced pluripotent stem cells, iPSCs, taking an adult cell like skin and reverting it to an embryonic-like state. From there, it can become any other cell type, with enormous potential for regenerative medicine. But there's a massive problem. Reprogramming cells is dangerous. When you reactivate genes making cells flexible, you disable tumor suppressor mechanisms preventing cancer, you remove the locks-keeping cells in proper roles. This is where Turritopsis becomes critically important. Because it solved the exact problem we're struggling with, it can reprogram cells massively and repeatedly without developing cancer. Because it evolved those extra DNA repair genes and enhanced tumor suppression, keeping the process safe. If we could understand exactly how those protective mechanisms work and implement similar safeguards in human cells, we might safely use cellular reprogramming for medical treatments without cancer risk. That's the holy grail of regenerative medicine. But we need to be realistic. We're not achieving human immortality soon, probably not ever. Even if we could safely reprogram human cells, we wouldn't want to reverse entire bodies back to infancy like the jellyfish does. What we're really after is targeted cellular repair, taking specific damaged tissues, reverting just those cells to a healthier state, then stopping before it goes too far. That's far more complex than what Turritopsis does. But studying this jellyfish gives insights into fundamental mechanisms that might make it possible. Let's zoom out. Because the immortal jellyfish is part of a larger pattern, Turritopsis isn't the only organism that's escaped normal aging rules. The Hydra continuously replaces all its cells and shows no biological aging. Hydras don't get old, they can be killed, but don't deteriorate. Some flatworms can be cut into pieces, and each fragment regenerates into a complete worm. Certain trees like bristlecone pines have lived over 5,000 years. Evolution created biological immortality multiple times in completely unrelated organisms, which suggests escaping death isn't impossible. It's just difficult, and most species don't benefit enough to evolve necessary mechanisms. What Turritopsis proves is that aging isn't a fundamental law of biology. It's a strategy evolution settled on for most species because it works well enough, but it's not mandatory, not inevitable. Cells don't have to deteriorate. Development doesn't have to be one way. Organisms don't have to die of old age. These are patterns that emerged because they're advantageous for most species, but they can be overridden when conditions favor different strategies. This should fundamentally change how we think about life and death. We think of aging as universal, like gravity, something unchangeable, but the immortal jellyfish is living proof that aging is negotiable. If a jellyfish the size of your fingernail, with a nervous system so simple it barely counts as a brain, can rewrite its biology to escape death indefinitely, what else is possible we haven't discovered? We've mapped less than 20% of the seafloor and thoroughly studied maybe 5% of marine species. The ocean is almost completely unknown. There could be organisms with abilities making the immortal jellyfish look mundane. And here's the unsettling thought. Turritopsis was discovered by accident by a student doing routine work. Nobody was looking for immortal jellyfish. Nobody expected them to exist. They were just there, drifting in harbors worldwide, casually breaking biology's rules while we walked past, unaware. How many other organisms are out there right now, solving problems we think are impossible, waiting for someone to notice them? So why are some jellyfish immortal? Because they evolved a biological reset button letting them escape aging by reprogramming their bodies back to juvenile state. It's not perfect, not risk-free, doesn't make them unkillable, but it lets them avoid the one death that claims almost every other complex organism: cellular senescence. This evolved as a last-ditch survival strategy for unpredictable oceans, a way to wait out catastrophic conditions in durable form, then return to adult life when things improve. For humans, the immortal jellyfish represents proof that aging can be solved, at least in theory, and it's giving us first real clues about how cellular reprogramming might work safely at scale. We're not going to copy it directly, but understanding how Turritopsis does what it does is already changing how we approach regenerative medicine, tissue repair, and treatment of age-related diseases. Insights from this tiny blob might eventually help extend human health span in ways that seemed like pure science fiction decades ago. And maybe that's the most remarkable thing. Not that it's immortal, but that it's showing us aging isn't the inevitable countdown we thought. It's a biological process like any other, and biological processes can be changed. Somewhere in the ocean right now, a jellyfish is sinking to the seafloor, its body collapsing inward, its cells forgetting what they are and preparing to become something else. It's dying and being reborn simultaneously, escaping death by running toward it and then passing it into a second life. If that's possible, what else is? Thanks for watching, and if you want to learn more about jellyfishes, make sure to join the Discord, link down below.